The value of the rand fell this week, at least in part due to tension between Russia and the Ukraine. Meanwhile, the U.S. Federal Reserve is having a policy meeting which often affects global markets. And closer to home, analysts expect the Reserve Bank to increase interest rates on Thursday. But why does Ukraine's fate affect a faraway economy like ours? Let's ask Dr. Iraj Abedian, the founder and chief economist of Pan-African Investment and Research. Doc, thank you so much for your time. Apart from that little blip at the beginning of the week, the rand has generally strengthened against the US dollar from the beginning of the year. What's been driving that performance, and how could that potential conflict in the Ukraine affect the rand going forward?
Well, the strength of or stability of the rand relatively has to do with the global economy performing. South African exports, particularly mining exports, having a very favorable global currency or hard currency prospects. And the more stable and growing the global economy, the more likely that our mining sector and other exports will perform better. At the same time, we've had other good news. We've had the Land Bank, the World Bank giving us a couple of billion or 11 billion. All of that adds to the inflow of foreign exchange into the country. At the same time that the domestic economy is not importing as much as we used to because we are not growing, and therefore the rand has got a strength. Of course, as the global financial markets go more and more normalizing post the COVID pandemic, central bankers such as Federal Reserve and others are going to increasingly increase interest rates, which means our Reserve Bank will have to respond to that. So we need to be prepared for the next 2 years for rising interest rates globally and locally. Of course, not at the same pace, but for us in South Africa, it means that we need to be mindful that interest rates are going to go up by about 1 to 1.5%, possibly 2% over the next 2 years.
You spoke of exports and imports. What is the trade relationship between South Africa, Russia, and the Ukraine, and how could our imports and exports be affected by any sanctions placed on Russia or any conflict in the Ukraine?
I think with respect, it has absolutely nothing to do with our relationship, exports and imports to and from Russia or Ukraine. It's about the interconnectedness of the global financial markets. For example, let's imagine, hopefully it won't happen, but let's imagine Russia invades the Ukraine, EU responds to it, America responds to it. It can be a confrontation for the next 2 years before the markets stabilize. We're going to get another sort of torpedo in the global economic growth situation. In that scenario, oil prices and gas prices are going to go sky high for a short while, but nonetheless they'll go sky high. The growth in EU will definitely diminish. It will affect our exports to the EU. And therefore, the interconnectedness of the global economy and financial sectors and commodity sectors particularly has made it inevitable, a truth that the prosperity of nations are interdependent, increasingly, not because of the environment, not because of the public health, but the reality is that on the economic and social welfare side, the earth is but one country, mankind is citizens. Governments can fight, militaries can fight, but the reality of prosperity of nations, that they are interdependent, their currencies are interdependent, their economies are interdependent, is undeniable. That is the driver of the current instability in the global economy.
Doc, the South African Reserve Bank set to make an announcement on interest rate changes on Thursday. What are you expecting? Any surprises, you think, or are you in line with other experts who are expecting a 25 basis points bump?
I think it's in all likelihood, I believe that we will have a minimum of 25 basis points. And it will not, as I mentioned earlier, it's going to be the beginning of a series of interest rate increases. Whether it will be 25 basis points or 50 basis points down the line, this time will be 25 basis points. But down the line, it will depend at what speed the Federal Reserve and other central bankers in the global economy respond to the persistent and stubborn inflation that at the moment has bedeviled the global economy.
All right, Doc, thank you so much for your time. We appreciate it and for explaining it so beautifully. Dr. Iraj Abedian of the Pan-African Investment and Research. Coming up.